I woke up to the sound of my phone's emergency alert. It was early in the morning and the message sent shivers down my spine. School lockdown in effect. Please remain calm and shelter in place. My heart pounded in my chest as I read the words, and I realized something was terribly wrong. I had no idea what was happening, but I knew I had to take the warning seriously. I quickly texted my friends, but none of them had any more information. Fear settled over me as I made my way to the school, my parents reassuring me that they were on their way to pick me up. The school seemed eerie in the dim light of the emergency bulbs. I walked towards the gymnasium where everyone was supposed to gather during lockdowns. The hallways were empty and the silence was oppressive. The only sounds were the echoing of my footsteps and the faint hum of the emergency lights. As I entered the gym, I noticed the other students huddled together in small groups, their faces etched with confusion and fear. The teachers tried to maintain an air of calm, but their eyes betrayed their anxiety. Nobody knew what was going on or why we were in lockdown. Time passed slowly, and the tension in the gym grew thicker with each passing minute. We tried to distract ourselves with whispered conversations and nervous laughter, but the uncertainty gnawed at us. What could be so serious that the entire school was locked down? Then the first gunshot rang out and the gym fell into stunned silence. The cold grip of terror clenched my heart, and my breathing grew shallow. Another shot followed, and then another. Panic erupted as we realized that danger was not just outside but inside the school. The teachers and students rushed to secure the gym's doors, but the intruder was already inside. A figure in a dark, hooded cloak emerged from the shadows. We could only see their eyes, which gleamed with malice. They held a gun and the barrel was pointed at us. A teacher bravely stepped forward, pleading for the intruder to spare us. The figure only responded with a chilling laugh before opening fire. Chaos erupted in the gym as students and teachers scattered, trying to find cover. The air filled with the sound of gunfire, screams, and the smell of gunpowder. I found shelter behind a row of bleachers, my heart pounding like a drum. I had never felt so helpless, so vulnerable. The situation was like a nightmare from which there was no waking up. I could hear my classmates' cries for help, their desperate pleas, and then the deafening silence that followed. The minutes felt like hours as I waited, praying for my parents to arrive and save me from this nightmare. But the sounds of the intruder's footsteps drew nearer. I knew I couldn't stay hidden forever. Summoning every ounce of courage, I peeked from behind the bleachers to see the intruder searching the gym, their eyes darting around. My heart raced, and I knew that I needed to escape before they found me. As quietly as possible, I slipped away from my hiding spot and crept towards the gym's exit. The emergency lights cast eerie, elongated shadows, making it difficult to distinguish friend from foe. I moved cautiously, my breath shallow and my eyes fixed on the hooded figure. Just when I thought I was in the clear, the intruder turned, their ears locking onto mine. Panic coursed through me as they raised their gun, and I sprinted towards the exit, praying I wouldn't be the next victim. Gunshots rang out behind me, bullets whizzing past, but I didn't look back. I burst through the gym doors and into the blinding daylight. My parents' car was just pulling into the parking lot, and I leaped into it, sobbing with relief. The lockdown nightmare was over, but it left a trail of tragedy and trauma in its wake. The identity of the intruder was never discovered, and the scars it left on our small community were deep and lasting. The school became a place of fear and dread, and the memory of that horrific day haunted me for the rest of my life. The horror of that school lockdown, the fear, the uncertainty, and the realization of the darkness that can exist in the most unexpected places still keeps me awake at night, reminding me that safety is never guaranteed and life can change in an instant. In the days that followed the lockdown, our small town was gripped by fear and sorrow. The entire community mourned the loss of our friends and teachers, and the trauma of that day would stay with us forever. The police conducted a thorough investigation, but the identity of the intruder remained a mystery. It was a haunting enigma, a specter that cast a long shadow over our town. The school, once a place of learning and laughter, now stood as a chilling monument to the horrors we had endured. The gymnasium, where so much blood had been shed, was closed off and became a place we dared not enter. The very walls seemed to whisper the echoes of that terrifying day. Counseling services were offered to survivors, and we spent countless hours sharing our stories, trying to make sense of the senseless. Many of us struggled with guilt, wondering why we had survived while others had not. It was a burden that weighed heavily on our hearts, one that no amount of therapy could fully lift. Over time, the fear and trauma receded, but it never truly vanished. We learned to live with the scars, but they served as a constant reminder of the vulnerability of life and the unpredictability of the world. I could never look at a school or hear a lockdown announcement without feeling a deep chill in my bones. As the years passed, the incident faded from national headlines, but our town would never forget. We held annual memorials for the victims, a somber gathering that brought our community together and allowed us to remember the lives that had been lost. We vowed never to let their memories be overshadowed by the darkness of that day. The school eventually reopened, and new students filled its halls. They knew little of the horrors that had occurred within those walls, and that was perhaps a good thing. The past, although painful, was something we had to let go of to move forward. But for those of us who had lived through the lockdown, there was no real moving on. We were marked by it, forever changed. I wish I could say that the lockdown was just a story, a work of fiction meant to chill the bones, but it was all too real, a nightmare that unfolded in the broad daylight of our lives. It taught me that safety is an illusion, that we can never truly predict what the future holds. It made me appreciate every moment, every smile, and every hug. I still have nightmares about that day, waking up in a cold sweat, reliving the terror. It's a wound that will never fully heal, a chapter that can never be closed, but it's a reminder of the strength that can be found in the face of unimaginable horror, the resilience of the human spirit, and the importance of cherishing the people we love. As I look back on that fateful day, I can only hope that the victims found peace and that the lessons we learned are not forgotten. The darkness that descended on our school may have scarred us, but it also revealed the light within us, the bonds of friendship and community that helped us survive the unimaginable. I never thought my high school years would be filled with fear and dread. Yet that's exactly what happened when the school fight broke out, an incident that would haunt me for the rest of my life. It started like any other day, but it would end in a nightmare. The day began with an air of tension. Rumors had been circulating about a massive brawl that was supposed to go down at our school that afternoon. No one knew exactly why it was happening, but the anticipation of violence hung over us like a dark cloud. During lunch, I overheard hushed conversations, the kind you only hear when something big is about to go down. Whispers about rival factions, long-standing grudges, and deep-seated hatred filled the cafeteria. As the clock inched closer to the final bell, I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to unfold. The hallways were abuzz with a strange mix of excitement and fear as the school day came to an end. I hurried to my locker to grab my backpack, but the atmosphere was charged with a sense of foreboding. My heart raced, and I just wanted to get out of the building and head home. As I made my way through the crowded hallway, the tension grew palpable. People were nervously checking their phones for updates, and a few were huddled in tight groups, their expressions grave. I knew I needed to be cautious to avoid any confrontation, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to be drawn into something far beyond my control. The moment I stepped out of the school doors, chaos erupted. The sight that met my eyes was a scene straight out of a nightmare. Two rival groups of students clashed in a frenzy of fists and kicks. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of anger and pain. I stood frozen, unable to look away from the horror unfolding before me. Students who had once been friends, or at least acquaintances, now pummeled each other mercilessly. Blood splattered across the pavement and the cries of agony filled the air. I desperately searched for a way to escape the madness. As I turned to retreat back into the school, a searing pain exploded in my back. I stumbled forward, crashing to the ground. I realized that I had been struck by a stray punch or a flying object. The pain was excruciating, and I could feel the warm, sticky sensation of blood oozing from the wound. Panic set in as I lay on the ground, unable to move. My backpack had been knocked from my shoulders, and I saw it lying just out of reach. I reached out, stretching my arm as far as I could, but it might as well have been a mile away. The fight raged on around me and no one seemed to notice my plight. I knew I couldn't stay there. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I dragged myself towards my backpack. The pain in my back was searing and I gritted my teeth to stifle my cries. The world around me had devolved into chaos, a hellish battleground where the lines between friend and foe blurred. Finally, I reached my backpack and fumbled for my phone. With trembling hands, I dialed 911, praying for help to arrive soon. The dispatcher assured me that they were sending assistance, but time passed like an eternity. I lay on the ground, surrounded by violence and fear, knowing that my life hung in the balance. The fight seemed to go on forever, but eventually the sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer with each passing moment. The sound of approaching police cars sent the combatants fleeing in all directions. I lay there waiting for the first responders to reach me, my vision growing dim as the pain threatened to engulf me. When the paramedics finally arrived, they worked quickly to stabilize me and get me to the hospital. My injuries were severe, but I would survive. As they loaded me into the ambulance, I couldn't help but wonder what had driven my fellow students to such madness. What could be so important that it led to this blood-soaked spectacle? The days that followed were a blur of pain, hospital rooms, and police interviews. I learned that the fight had been the result of a long-standing feud between two groups of students, a feud that had escalated to a point of no return. It was a senseless battle, one that had cost many their innocence and some their future. I never truly recovered from that day. The physical wounds healed, but the emotional scars ran deep. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had glimpsed a darkness within my fellow students, a darkness that could be unleashed with devastating consequences. It was a lesson I would carry with me for the rest of my life. The school fight became a shadow that loomed over our community, a reminder of the fragility of human nature and the destructive power of hatred. I could only hope that someday we would find a way to heal the wounds and prevent such horrors from happening again. But the memory of that day, the sight of violence and chaos, was etched into my soul, a nightmare that would never fade. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the scars on my back and the memories of that gruesome day began to fade. Physically, I was on the mend, but emotionally, I was a wreck. Night after night, I was haunted by nightmares. The sounds of fists hitting flesh, the screams and the pained faces of my fellow students. The incident had left an indelible mark on our school, and it was clear that things would never be the same. The atmosphere was heavy with tension, and the once vibrant spirit of our student body had withered away. Friendships were strained, and trust had become a rare commodity. The school had become a battlefield, not just on that day, but in the ongoing Cold War between rival groups. Despite the authorities' best efforts, the perpetrators of the school fight had largely escaped punishment. The chaotic nature of the brawl made it difficult to identify and prosecute those responsible. But the fear of retribution still hung over the heads of those who had been involved, and a culture of silence prevailed, as witnesses were too terrified to speak up. I became an outsider in my own school, my physical and emotional scars setting me apart from my peers. I withdrew into myself, avoiding any confrontation or involvement in the ongoing feuds. It was a lonely existence, but it was the only way I could cope with the trauma. The incident had also changed the way I looked at the world. I had witnessed the capacity for darkness and violence that could lurk within even the most unexpected people. It made me hyper-aware of the hatred and prejudice that simmered beneath the surface, and it left me with a deep-seated fear of the unknown. My classmates, too, were changed by that day. Some became more hardened, while others withdrew, retreating into their own inner worlds. It was as though a dark cloud had settled over our lives, casting a shadow that we couldn't escape. The innocence of our youth had been stolen, and it was replaced by a constant sense of unease. The school fight was a grim reminder that violence can erupt in the most unexpected places, that hatred can fester and grow until it explodes into chaos. It taught me that we must be vigilant, not only in our schools, but in society as a whole, to prevent such tragedies from happening again. Time, they say, is a great healer, but the scars of that day were slow to fade. Gradually, the memories grew less vivid, and the nightmares became less frequent. I found solace in the support of my family, who had watched helplessly as I was caught up in that terrible event. Years passed, and I moved on to college and then to a job in a new city. I tried to leave the memories of the school fight behind me, to start fresh in a place where no one knew my past. But the shadows of that day were never far behind, always lurking in the corners of my mind. I wondered what had become of my classmates, those who had been both victims and perpetrators of that senseless violence. I hoped that they had found a way to break free from the cycle of hatred and revenge to build better lives for themselves. But I also knew that some scars run too deep to ever truly heal. As I sat in my new apartment, far from the place where my innocence had been stolen, I couldn't help but think of that fateful day. The memory of the school fight would always be with me, a haunting reminder of the darkness that could consume even the most ordinary of lives. It was a lesson I had learned the hard way and one I would carry with me always, a silent witness to the unseen battles that rage within us all. Growing up in a remote village in West Africa, my friends and I had heard rumors about a legendary mango tree deep in the bush. The stories spoke of mangoes sweeter than any we had ever tasted. These tales were tantalizing, but they also came with a stern warning from the elders: never venture into the thick, untamed bush alone. One scorching afternoon, my curiosity got the better of me, and I convinced 5 of my friends to join me on a forbidden mango hunt. We set out with machetes, our mouths watering at the thought of the succulent mangoes awaiting us. The sun was merciless, but our determination was unwavering. As we ventured deeper into the bush, the landscape grew increasingly dense and untamed. The familiar sounds of our village faded into the distance, replaced by the haunting cries of unseen creatures. The air was thick with humidity, and the towering trees blocked out the sun, casting the bush into a perpetual gloom. My friend Ada spotted the mango tree first. Its gnarled branches twisted and reached for the heavens, their leaves a deep emerald green. We gasped in awe at the sight, mesmerized by the size and number of mangoes hanging from the limbs. They were the most vibrant shade of orange, glistening in the dappled sunlight. As the village mango expert, I was tasked with scaling the tree. I climbed the tree with determination, my heart pounding with excitement. The branches creaked beneath my weight as I reached out for the juiciest mango I could find. But just as I was about to pluck it, I heard a rustling in the leaves below. Startled, I looked down to see a pair of eyes gleaming in the shadows. My heart froze and I shouted to my friends to alert them. They sprang into action, scanning the darkness below, and then we saw it, a pair of eyes eerie and yellow, peering out from the tangled underbrush. We realized that we were not alone in this place, and the bush was home to creatures far more dangerous than we had anticipated. The eyes belonged to a leopard, a fearsome predator known for its stealth and cunning. The mango I had been reaching for was forgotten as I clung to the tree, paralyzed by fear. The leopard slinked closer, its spotted coat blending seamlessly with the shadows. The hot breath of the beast ruffled the leaves, and its eyes never left us. We were trapped in a nightmarish standoff with the leopard, and our minds raced to find a way out of this terrifying predicament. My friends whispered prayers under their breath, their eyes locked on the predator. I could see the fear in their faces, the realization that our curiosity had led us into a perilous situation. As the minutes stretched into hours, the tension was unbearable. The leopard was patient, stalking us from below. We dared not move or make a sound, knowing that the slightest noise could trigger an attack. Our thoughts raced, and we wondered if we would ever see our village again. Time passed slowly, but eventually the sun began to dip below the horizon. The changing light seemed to disturb the leopard, and it melted back into the underbrush. We waited in breathless silence until we were certain it had gone. With the danger gone, we descended from the mango tree and made our way back to the safety of our village, our hearts still pounding with the memory of our close encounter. We had learned a valuable lesson that day. Curiosity could lead us into the jaws of danger, and the elders' warnings were not to be taken lightly. The forbidden mango hunt had turned into a harrowing experience, a tale we would recount to the village for years to come. The mangoes had remained out of reach, a tantalizing prize that would forever elude us. And as we returned to our village, we couldn't help but feel a sense of relief mixed with humility, knowing that some secrets of the bush were better left undisturbed.